Hi there, happy Tuesday. I'm Mary, I'm the manager at the Claremont Branch Library, and this is our reading of The Land of Oz by L. Frank Baum. Before we get into the reading today, I wanted to encourage you to sign up for our summer reading program. It started yesterday on June 1st and will go through the end of August. So if you go to the San Diego Public Library website, you will see there an area where you can click to sign up for the summer reading program. If you read for 10 hours or read 10 books, you can earn prizes. So I encourage you, go to the San Diego Public Library website and click on the link to the summer reading program and sign up for that. And now let's get into our reading of The Land of Oz. If you remember, yesterday actually, we read chapters 7 and 8, and in the first chapter we had one of my favorite encounters of this book between the Scarecrow and Jack Pumpkinhead, where they believe they are unable to talk to each other because they think they speak different languages, having come from different countries in the Land of Oz. They bring in Jellia Jam to help them as an interpreter, and she interprets what they say in her own way rather than interpreting what they actually said. And throughout the entire exchange, at the end they realize they really do speak the same language and they become friends. In the next chapter, we had Tip, who's still trying to make it to the Emerald City to catch up with Jack Pumpkinhead. Tip met General Ginger and her all-girl army of revolt, and he followed them to the Emerald City, where General Ginger and her army took over the Emerald City without any fight at all. So now that the Emerald City is conquered, we pick up here in chapter 9, and let's see what happens. So chapter 9, the Scarecrow plans his escape. Tip slipped away from the girls and followed swiftly after the soldier with the green whiskers. The invading army entered the city more slowly, for they stopped to dig emeralds out of the walls and paving stones with the points of their knitting needles. So the soldier and the boy reached the palace before the news had spread that the city was conquered. The Scarecrow and Jack Pumpkinhead were still playing at quoits in the courtyard when the game was interrupted by the abrupt entrance of the Royal Army of Oz, who came flying in without his hat or gun, his clothes in sad disarray, and his long beard floating a yard behind him as he ran. "Tally one for me," said the Scarecrow calmly. "What's wrong, my man?" he added, addressing the soldier. "Oh, your Majesty, your Majesty! The city is conquered!" gasped the royal army, who was all out of breath. "This is quite sudden," said the Scarecrow, "but please go and bar all the doors and windows of the palace, while I show this Pumpkinhead how to throw a quoit." The soldier hastened to do this, while Tip, who had arrived at his heels, remained in the courtyard to look at the Scarecrow with wondering eyes. His Majesty continued to throw the quoits as coolly as if no danger threatened his throne, but the Pumpkinhead, having caught sight of Tip, ambled toward the boy as fast as his wooden legs would go. "Good afternoon, noble parent!" he cried delightedly. "I'm glad to see you are here. That terrible sawhorse ran away with me." "I suspected it," said Tip. "Did you get hurt? Are you at all cracked?" "No, I arrived safely," answered Jack, "and His Majesty has been very kind to me indeed." At this moment the soldier with the green whiskers returned, and the Scarecrow asked, "By the way, who has conquered me?" "A regiment of girls gathered from the four corners of the Land of Oz," replied the soldier, still pale with fear. "But where was my standing army at the time?" inquired His Majesty, looking at the soldier gravely. "Your standing army was running," answered the fellow honestly, "for no man could face the terrible weapons of the invaders." "Well," said the Scarecrow after a moment's thought, "I don't mind much the loss of my throne, for it's a tiresome job to rule over the Emerald City, and this crown is so heavy that it makes my head ache. But I hope the conquerors have no intention of injuring me, just because I happen to be king." "I heard them say," remarked Tip with some hesitation, that they intend to make a rag carpet out of your outside and stuff their sofa cushions with your inside." "Then I really am in danger," declared His Majesty positively, "and it will be wise for me to consider a means of escape." "Where can you go?" asked Jack Pumpkinhead. "Why, to my friend the Tin Woodman, who rules over the Winkies and calls himself their emperor," was the answer. "I am sure he will protect me." Tip was looking out of the window. "The palace is surrounded by the enemy," said he. "It's too late to escape. They would soon tear you to pieces." The Scarecrow sighed. "In an emergency," he announced, "it is always a good thing to pause and reflect. Please excuse me while I pause and reflect." "But we also are in danger," said the Pumpkinhead anxiously. "If any of these girls understand cooking, my end is not far off." "Nonsense!" exclaimed the Scarecrow. "They're too busy to cook, even if they know how." "But should I remain here, a prisoner for any length of time," Jack protested, "I'm liable to spoil." "Ah, then you would not be fit to associate with," returned the Scarecrow. "The matter is more serious than I suspected." "You," said the Pumpkinhead gloomily, "are liable to live for many years. My life is necessarily short, so I must take advantage of the few days that remain to me." "There, there, don't worry," said the Scarecrow soothingly. "If you'll keep quiet long enough for me to think, I'll try to find some way for all of us to escape." So the others waited in patient silence while the Scarecrow walked to a corner and stood with his face to the wall for a good 5 minutes. At the end of that time he faced them with a more cheerful expression on his painted face. "Where is the Sawhorse you rode here?" he asked the Pumpkinhead. "Why, I said he was a jewel, and so your man locked him up in the royal treasury," said Jack. "It was the only place I could think of, your Majesty," added the soldier, fearing he had made a blunder. "It pleases me very much," said the Scarecrow. "Has the animal been fed?" "Oh, yes, I gave him a heaping peck of sawdust." "Excellent," said the Scarecrow. "Bring the horse here at once." The soldier hastened away, and presently they heard the clattering of the horse's wooden legs upon the pavement as he was led into the courtyard. His Majesty regarded the steed critically. "He doesn't seem especially graceful," he remarked musingly, "but I suppose he can run." "He can indeed," said Tip, gazing upon the Sawhorse admiringly. "Then, bearing us upon his back, he must make a dash through the ranks of the rebels and carry us to my friend the Tin Woodman," announced the Scarecrow. "He can't carry 4, objected Tip. "No, but he may be induced to carry 3, said His Majesty. "I shall therefore leave my royal army behind, for, from the ease with which he was conquered, I have little confidence in his powers." "Still, he can run," declared Tip laughingly. "I expected this blow," said the soldier sulkily, "but I can bear it. I shall disguise myself by cutting off my lovely green whiskers. And, after all, it is no more dangerous to face those reckless girls than to ride this fiery, untamed wooden horse." "Perhaps you are right," observed His Majesty. "But, for my part, not being a soldier, I am fond of danger. Now, my boy, you must mount first, and please sit as close to the horse's neck as possible." Tip climbed quickly to his place, and the soldier and the Scarecrow managed to hoist the Pumpkinhead to a seat just behind him. There remained so little space for the king that he was liable to fall off as soon as the horse started. "Fetch a clothesline," said the king to his army, "and tie us all together. Then if one falls off, we will all fall off." And while the soldier was gone for the clothesline, His Majesty continued, "It is well for me to be careful, for my very existence is in danger." "I have to be as careful as you do," said Jack. "Not exactly," replied the Scarecrow, "for if anything happened to me, that would be the end of me. But if anything happened to you, they could use you for seed." The soldier now returned with a long line and tied all 3 firmly together, also lashing them to the body of the Sawhorse, so there seemed little danger of their tumbling off. "Now throw open the gates," commanded the Scarecrow, "and we will make a dash to liberty or to death." The courtyard in which they were standing was located in the center of the great palace, which surrounded it on all sides. But in one place a passage led to an outer gateway, which the soldier had barred by order of his sovereign. It was through this gateway His Majesty proposed to escape, and the royal army now led the Sawhorse along the passage and unbarred the gate, which swung backward with a loud crash. "Now," said Tip to the horse, "you must save us all. Run as fast as you can for the gate of the city, and don't let anything stop you." "All right," answered the Sawhorse gruffly, and dashed away so suddenly that Tip had to gasp for breath and hold firmly to the post he had driven into the creature's neck. Several of the girls who stood outside guarding the palace were knocked over by the Sawhorse's mad rush. Others ran screaming out of the way, and only one or two jabbed their knitting needles frantically at the escaping prisoners. Tip got one small prick in his left arm, which smarted for an hour afterward, but the needles had no effect upon the Scarecrow or Jack Pumpkinhead, who never even suspected they were being prodded. As for the Sawhorse, he made a wonderful record, upsetting a fruit cart, overturning several meek-looking men, and finally bowling over the new guardian of the gate, a fussy little fat woman appointed by General Ginger. Nor did the impetuous charger stop then. Once outside the walls of the Emerald City, he dashed along the road to the west with a fast and violent leap that shook the breath out of the boy and filled the Scarecrow with wonder. Jack had ridden at this mad rate once before, so he devoted every effort to holding with both hands his pumpkin head upon its stick, enduring meantime the dreadful jolting with the courage of a philosopher. "Slow him up! Slow him up!" shouted the Scarecrow. "My straw is all shaking down into my legs." But Tip had no breath to speak, so the Sawhorse continued his wild career unchecked and with unabated speed. Presently they came to the banks of a wide river, and without a pause the wooden steed gave one final leap and launched them all in mid-air. A second later they were rolling, splashing, and bobbing about in the water, the horse struggling frantically to find a rest for its feet, and its riders being first plunged beneath the rapid current and then floating upon the surface like corks. Chapter 10. The Journey to the Tin Woodman. Tip was well soaked and dripping water from every angle of his body, but he managed to lean forward and shout in the ear of the Sawhorse, "Keep still, you fool! Keep still!" The horse at once ceased struggling and floated calmly upon the surface, its wooden body being as buoyant as a raft. "What does the word fool mean?" inquired the horse. "It is a term of reproach," answered Tip, somewhat ashamed of the expression. "I only use it when I'm angry." "Then it pleases me to be able to call you a fool in return," said the horse, "for I did not make the river, nor put it in our way, so only a term of reproach is fit for one who becomes angry with me for falling into the water." "That is quite evident," replied Tip, "so I will acknowledge myself in the wrong." Then he called out to the Pumpkinhead, "Are you all right, Jack?" There was no reply, so the boy called to the king, "Are you all right, your majesty?" The Scarecrow groaned. "I am all wrong somehow," he said in a weak voice. "How very wet this water is." Tip was bound so tightly by the cord that he could not turn his head to look at his companions, so he said to the Sawhorse, "Paddle with your legs toward the shore." The horse obeyed, and although their progress was slow, they finally reached the opposite river bank, at a place where it was low enough to enable the creature to scramble upon dry land. With some difficulty, the boy managed to get his knife out of his pocket and cut the cords that bound the riders to one another and to the wooden horse. He heard the Scarecrow fall to the ground with a mushy sound, and then he himself quickly dismounted and looked at his friend Jack. The wooden body with its gorgeous clothing still sat upright on the horse's back, but the pumpkin head was gone, and only the sharpened stick that served for a neck was visible. As for the Scarecrow, the straw in his body had shaken down with the jolting and packed itself into his legs and the lower part of his body, which appeared very plump and round, while his upper half seemed like an empty sack. Upon his head the Scarecrow still wore the heavy crown which had been sewed on to prevent his losing it, but the head was now so damp and limp that the weight of the gold and jewels sagged forward and crushed the painted face into a mass of wrinkles that made him look exactly like a Japanese pug dog. Tip would have laughed, had he not been so anxious about his man Jack. But the Scarecrow, however damaged, was all there, while the pumpkin head that was so necessary to Jack's existence was missing. So the boy seized a long pole that fortunately lay near at hand and anxiously turned again toward the river. Far out upon the waters he sighted the golden hue of the pumpkin, which gently bobbed up and down with the motion of the waves. At that moment it was quite out of Tip's reach, but after a time it floated nearer and still nearer, until the boy was able to reach it with his pole and draw it to the shore. Then he brought it to the top of the bank, carefully wiped the water from its pumpkin face with his handkerchief, and ran with it to Jack and replaced the head on the man's neck. "Dear me," were Jack's first words. "What a dreadful experience! I wonder if water is liable to spoil pumpkins." Tip did not think a reply was necessary, for he knew that the Scarecrow also stood in need of his help, so he carefully removed the straw from the king's body and legs and spread it out in the sun to dry. The wet clothing he hung over the body of the Sawhorse. "If water spoils pumpkins," observed Jack with a deep sigh, "then my days are numbered." "I've never noticed that water spoils pumpkins," returned Tip, "unless the water happens to be boiling. If your head isn't cracked, my friend, you must be in fairly good condition." "Oh, my head isn't cracked in the least," declared Jack more cheerfully. "Then don't worry," retorted the boy. "Care once killed a cat." "Then," said Jack seriously, "I am very glad indeed that I am not a cat." The sun was fast drying their clothing, and Tip stirred up his Majesty's straw so that the warm rays might absorb the moisture and make it as crisp and dry as ever. When this had been accomplished, he stuffed the Scarecrow into symmetrical shape and smoothed out his face so that he wore his usual gay and charming expression. "Thank you very much," said the monarch brightly, as he walked about and found himself to be well balanced. "There are several distinct advantages in being a Scarecrow, for if one has friends near at hand to repair damages, nothing very serious can happen to you." "I wonder if hot sunshine is liable to crack pumpkins," said Jack with an anxious ring in his voice. "Not at all, not at all," replied the Scarecrow gaily. "All you need fear, my boy, is old age. When your golden youth has decayed, we shall quickly part, but you needn't look forward to it. We'll discover the facts ourselves and notify you. But come, let us resume our journey. I am anxious to greet my friend the Tin Woodman." So they remounted the Sawhorse, Tip holding to the post, the pumpkin clinging to Tip, and the Scarecrow with both arms around the wooden form of Jack. "Go slowly, for now there is no danger of pursuit," said Tip to his steed. "All right," responded the creature in a voice rather gruff. "Aren't you a little horse?" asked the Pumpkinhead politely. The Sawhorse gave an angry prance and rolled one naughty eye back toward Tip. "See here," he growled, "can't you protect me from insult?" "To be sure," answered Tip soothingly. "I am sure Jack meant no harm, and it will not do for us to quarrel, you know. We must all remain good friends." "I'll have nothing more to do with that Pumpkinhead," declared the Sawhorse viciously. "He loses his head too easily to suit me." There seemed no fitting reply to this speech, so for a time they rode along in silence. After a while the Scarecrow remarked, "This reminds me of old times. It was upon this grassy knoll that I once saved Dorothy from the stinging bees of the Wicked Witch of the West." "Do stinging bees injure pumpkins?" asked Jack, glancing around fearfully. "They are all dead, so it doesn't matter," replied the Scarecrow. "And here is where Nick Chopper destroyed the Wicked Witch's gray wolves." "Who is Nick Chopper?" asked Tip. "That is the name of my friend, the Tin Woodman," answered His Majesty. "And here is where the winged monkeys captured us and bound us, and flew away with little Dorothy," he continued after they had traveled a little way farther. "Do winged monkeys ever eat pumpkins?" asked Jack with a shiver of fear. "I do not know, but you have little cause to worry, for the winged monkeys are now the slaves of Glinda the Good, who owns the golden cap that commands their services," said the Scarecrow reflectively. Then the stuffed monarch became lost in thought, recalling the days of past adventures, and the Sawhorse rocked and rolled over the flower-strewn fields, and carried its riders swiftly upon their way. Twilight fell by and by, and then the dark shadows of night. So Tip stopped the horse, and they all proceeded to dismount. "I'm tired out," said the boy, yawning wearily, "and the grass is soft and cool. Let us lie down here and sleep until morning." "I can't sleep," said Jack. "I never do," said the Scarecrow. "I do not even know what sleep is," said the Sawhorse. "Still, we must have consideration for this poor boy, who is made of flesh and blood and bone, and gets tired," suggested the Scarecrow, in his usual thoughtful manner. "I remember it was the same with little Dorothy. We always had to sit through the night while she slept." "I'm sorry," said Tip meekly, "but I can't help it, and I'm dreadfully hungry, too." "Here's a new danger," remarked Jack gloomily. "I hope you are not fond of eating pumpkins." "Not unless they are stewed and made into pies," answered the boy, laughing. "So have no fears of me, friend Jack." "What a coward that Pumpkinhead is," said the Sawhorse scornfully. "You might be a coward yourself if you knew you were liable to spoil," retorted Jack angrily. "There, there," interrupted the Scarecrow. "Don't let us quarrel. We all have our weaknesses, dear friends, so we must strive to be considerate of one another. And since this poor boy is hungry and has nothing whatever to eat, let us all remain quiet and allow him to sleep, for it is said that in sleep a mortal may forget even hunger." "Thank you," exclaimed Tip gratefully. "Your Majesty is fully as good as you are wise, and that is saying a good deal." Then he stretched himself upon the grass, and using the stuffed form of the Scarecrow for a pillow, he was presently fast asleep. And that is the end of our reading for the day. Tomorrow we will pick up with chapters 11 and 12, where we will meet our old friend, the Tin Woodman, Emperor of the Winkies, and a new friend, a new character, who I hope you find interesting. He is a very unique character that Baum created. So tune back in tomorrow at 2 o'clock for the next 2 chapters of The Land of Oz. And if you have a chance, do sign up for the summer reading program and get credit for the books that you are reading and earn a few prizes. So have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will enjoy reading to you again tomorrow.